Yeah, sure you can.
Very good to meet you. Very good to meet you. Thank you very much. I find this drink. I get how are you? Yeah, thank you for your comments as well.
Sounds great. You're getting anywhere nice?
Barcelona.
So yes. Great. Well, we'll catch up.
We'll sit here in the front. Actually, we'll sit in the front. Yeah, that's for a little panel later on. That's yeah, we'll. You can sit on the center. Maybe you can be more centralized.
We should take seats.
Yeah.
Well, I thought Axel and I were thinking about having breakfast with Nottingham. Although we could go to 11 o'clock.
We'll forget about everything we don't think you.
See if we can match it.
No, but seriously, if you have any info on what he's doing and...
So we know where he will be from 7:30-ish.
Where they do this?
In the house. In the House of Lords.
Oh, really? But I have that public meeting, I'm holding it until 9:30.
Whether he is actually going to us.
Exactly.
Our experience.
Have you ever had meetings cancelled with Nottingham?
Yes.
All our meetings.
Yeah.
Oh, cancelled. Oh, you're right.
Yeah, we never.
No,
met.
actually, I never had a proper meeting, and you're right, they were always cancelled. I had one to but
You know, I made it once.
and he's weird, you know, the way he's
There's that funny Alpine conference which I'm quite jealous of. But he does this. I did get him once in the car. We had this hilarious conversation.
When was that?
This was the founders forum.
Okay, no, I didn't know
We had
you
this
were there.
hilarious dinner. Macron came. He and I were both speaking. And the guy came. So I just want to introduce my minister. Just to stand up. So he goes, I just want to say, and I have written this, I sent him a love letter.
Was that,
If my entire
was that
speech
your
was...
speech?
No, no, so my entire speech was... If you want to understand the difference between the British and the French minister, you know, I get the guy who says, my minister's just to stand up and meet him. The French minister gets the next president of France, I've got a 10-minute love letter, this guy's incredible.
Right, we're being
That's,
beamed
that's
out.
funny. I didn't. Alors, on est sur Instagram. Ok. No comment.
Go. What? We're all getting so excited.
Après, je pense que je me sentirai très libre d'aborder ce sujet très bientôt.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for coming to the Open Data Institute. We've got a very interesting afternoon ahead of us. My name is Gavin Starks. I'm the Chief Executive of the ODI. I'd like to welcome our UK Minister for State and Culture and the Digital Economy, Ed Vaizey, French Minister for State and the Digital Sector, Axel Lemaire, French State Chief Digital Officer, Henri Verdier, and Nigel Shadbolt, who's our co-founder, our chairman and principal of Oxford College, Jesus College. Just a little bit to set some context, I think particularly in the current climate, is, do you want to pull the windows shut? Just, stop it.
Can't legislate for that.
Okay. That's it, thank you. Just to start with a general sentiment of data knows no borders, data knows no boundaries, and I think very much in the spirit of the work that we're doing here at the ODI and the work that we're doing around trying to create the web of data internationally, stimulating open innovation around the world, across Europe. We're very keen to see exactly these kinds of collaboration. At the ODI here, we help people connect and inspire people around the world to innovate with data. And we've worked on many European projects, building data portals, helping to build international standards that enable data publishing and data usage, and incubating open data startups across Europe. I think there's now over 50 companies that we've assisted across not just the UK, but across the whole of Europe. We're very keen to see the reports, and I'm going to welcome now Henri and Nigel to talk us through the reports over the next 20 minutes or so.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Gavin. Thank you. Okay, this is a great privilege to be here, and really something quite special. We didn't necessarily expect the context we're in, but we're in an interesting place, and as we will point out, the opportunities around data and data innovation in our economies are huge. And back in November, we were commissioned by our Chancellor in the UK and by the Minister of Finance in France to work on a report around the opportunities in the data economy. We have these reports here today in French and English, and we're going to say a little bit about what is contained in there. But just first of all, a huge thank you to our team from both sides of La Manche, but the TAC channel, and we are absolutely delighted with the effort that we've seen from the communities that we've engaged with, and also the willingness to cooperate and collaborate. The reason for the UK-French task force was the recognition that there were so many areas in which our entrepreneurial interest in data was so well matched, and the notion is that what we can recommend is something that others might wish to follow and emulate. So thanks to the various members of our advisory team who are there, across particularly, and also officials who helped us in this work.
If I can, we want to thank you, Minister, also because it was a great opportunity to go further with good friends, to discover new friends, and whatever will happen, we discovered a lot of eras of cooperation, and they will happen.
Indeed, they will. Okay, so the whole premise of this work is that we're living through a data revolution. It's easy to say it, but it bears to be restated. referred to it as ambient data. But what has happened is that what was previously a scarcity has become an abundance. Some people would say a superabundance. And when things like this happen through history, whether it's the agrarian revolution, the invention of the printing press, the web itself, things change. The fundamental difference in the data revolution is that data itself does not have to be rivalrous. It does not mean that if I use the data, you can't use it. If I consume it, you can't consume it. And these are fundamentally different dynamics in our economy.
Yeah. Yes, you told what I wanted to say, but it's a complete different, but you know this you know this clearly, but it's a complete different strategical context. And it will change everything about industry, about research, about cooperation, about governance. And we didn't spend too much time to explain that everything will change because it's just the third or fourth time in the history of humanity that some very important, very scarce resource become surabundant and everything has to recombine. So we didn't spend too much time and we focused on a strategy and ideas to implement and activate.
And in our work, it was not hard to come up with a whole range of recommendations. In fact, our original work had 70 specific outcomes that we could have focused on. But what we were keen to do was to boil those down into 4 broad themes and try and integrate major recommendations. And we just want to spend a few minutes talking about those. But before we do that, we want to also emphasize that in the world of data, language is important. What we did, we adopted from the ODI's ideas the concept of the data spectrum. When one talks to leaders of business or in government or a whole range of individuals, it's very easy for people to get confused about the differences between open, shared, closed, personal, non-personal. The same rules do not apply across this data spectrum, and it is really helpful to think about the issues that do arise in these different contexts.
That can be very important because, Mr. Le Maire, you know this about your bill. A lot of people have very strong ideas, but they just speak just about open data or big data or intellectual property, and they don't figure that there is a complete spectrum, and we need a complete strategy within the spectrum, and that's very important to remember every time that you have a huge amount of data and a lot of context.
So when we talk about data innovation, it might apply across the spectrum. We think there is a particularly privileged role for open data because governments can provide it and it can become part of something we think is very important that we'll mention a little later. So what is our strategy for growth? Well, we've really thought about 4 major areas where we believe that data can play a huge role. And the first is around innovation. And our recommendations, 3 broad recommendations around innovation, from data challenge programs that we could do jointly together. We have very good experience of running these in the UK. There are programs being commissioned in France around a data innovators passport scheme that would allow for very easy exchange between our startup businesses and so forth. And also a data twinning program to recognize that regionally, there are huge areas of strength. This is just a London-Paris phenomenon. From the north of England and in Scotland, Ireland, across different parts and provinces in France, there are very strong local data capabilities.
That's important because we are surprised. In fact, everything is possible with those data. We can imagine, we can dream, we can have new moonshots, new projects, and there is a global lack of ambition and imagination. So we have to nurture it to favorize biggest project, biggest ambition, and it's not impossible. With this strategy of, sorry for my challenges, with a strategy with better ecosystem, with more challenging ecosystem, people they work together, but challenge together also. We need more ambition.
And in our report, you will see a little bit more detail on each of these recommendations. And what we're very keen to do, as we'll mention at the end, is work out how we can take these recommendations and build a real implementation plan around them. We recognize, we've heard, we've discussed and advised and seen these as 3 fundamental areas where we can promote innovation between our two countries. A third key feature is around infrastructure, around data as infrastructure. And there's already work underway in our different countries on this. If we were to look in the UK, very interesting work around open banking that Gavin and others helped lead here in the UK to devise open standards to allow retail banking and other types of banking information to be exchanged, to build much more frictionless services. The excellent work done in France on their national address system, an essential piece of infrastructure. Addresses, company registers, the property gazettes, the property holdings of individuals and companies. These are fundamentally important parts of our data infrastructure that should be held as important public assets, openly available. And finally, we share a common interest in building services that allow citizens to engage with our government. In fact, one interesting example are the Verify, the UK Verify and the French Connect system that allow for much more seamless interaction. Specific activities in these areas could really promote best practice.
Maybe in France it will be named Service Public de la Donnée, maybe the same idea. Those infrastructures will be as important as road or water. It's a new infrastructure for the new economy. And we cannot make just open data. It's not just to open the data that we have. Sometimes we will have to conceive, to invest, to distribute the data we need, and not just the data we have. So there is a huge program of investment, but not only investment. For example, this project, the government just asked, or ODI, I don't know, to banks to organize themselves to share the same APIs. It's not public money, it's intelligence, it's cooperation.
It's trying to unlock the magic that is the network effect around data. And if my co-founder did anything at all, Tim Berners-Lee, in giving us the open protocols and standards of the web, what he allowed was for a world of siloed information documentation systems to be integrated together with simple open standards. We think there is huge value to this, as is there to building simple infrastructures that allow for commerce, services to much more seamlessly flow across our borders. We've got specific ideas around what could be done here, and the governments themselves are beginning to develop powerful ideas here. I think the other thing that we came to and could not avoid was the huge skills challenge around data. And it is at the root of many of the things that challenge us. It's great to provide data, but it's useless without data literacy. From our leaders to the children in our schools, to the entrepreneurs in our budding businesses, we have a chronic shortage of data scientists, data apprentices, people who are comfortable with the use of data in support of a whole range of policy.
Yeah, if I can emphasize something, it's not just about the lack of data scientists. Everyone knows that Europe will need thousands of data scientists, but the culture of the data, and we speak specifically about global leaders within administration or big companies, the culture of data in a lot of jobs, design, marketing, business schools, and probably for your young children is very, very important. In the second phase of the job, when we will propose very concrete, activable items, we will have a curriculum and a real proposition about this. But a lot of people need to understand that they can change their job with the data. It's not just about data science.
No. That's a very good point that Henri makes. In fact, this morning I was talking to a 600 or so information practitioners and librarians in Brighton about the opportunities of open data, and a very clear message coming across was, what do libraries look like in the 21st century? What are they there to do? They're there to support things like information and data literacy. If we're to do this seriously with the next generation, how do we get these skills into our curricula, into the schools? It isn't just about learning to code, it's about learning to use evidence and data in support of arguments, whether it's history, or geography, or economics or mathematics and engineering, the role should be pervasive. I think the other thing that we focused on was the whole notion of trust in data and empowerment. Too often in our experience, government attitudes around this is that data is something that is done to citizens or businesses. Your consumer data is something that a business can exploit. But surely a better resolution is to empower people through their data assets. And at a time when there is genuine worry around whether or not there are new kinds of unnatural monopoly around data assets, what do we need to do to learn the lessons of more equitable and more effective settlements between consumers and citizens and business and government?
Yeah, that's the important part, of course, of the work. Everybody knows that those data can be used for the citizen, for emancipation of the citizen, or against them, for the consumer, or more or less against them. And we had a lot of discussion, and at the end of the discussion, it was not the beginning, we thought that first we have to give the data back. So all these movements, like My Data here and Me Data in France, data portability in France, that's very important because that's the most empowerment. And second, we need new research about algorithmic decision, algorithmic verification, how to communicate and to explain an algorithm. And in this field, we need academic research. It's something very, very new, and we don't have the answer.
It's becoming very apparent that when people look at the decisions that are being made with the information that's at the disposal of governments and companies, they quite rightly want to understand how was a decision arrived at. And we do have examples where this already applies. In credit agencies, for example, your credit rating, your worthiness to receive credit, the process by which that is determined has to be transparently available. Otherwise, there's a risk of discrimination against the person on the end of that. We think that level of accountability will need to be something that is really built into the way in which people interact with the data ecosystem. So it needs research, but it's a very pressing and immediate concern. And a final point around this might be to do with whatever the ultimate resolution of our discussions in the European context, there will be regulations that will emerge that we will variously have to deal with, both our countries. So the general directive around data protection will make some very specific requirements about how personal information is managed. And these will become very important for us to build in and understand as we seek to build services that are usable across our various jurisdictions. The companies in the digital world, quite rightly, would like to build once and deploy everywhere. And how do we make that happen in a way that is manageable? So, really, we wanted to kind of give you a sense of what the major recommendations were. There will be certainly more work that we'll be undertaking over the summer to try and build a more detailed implementation plan. And I would just like to say that I have found the whole process a great example where our strengths are very well matched, but also complementary. We're very proud in the UK of the fact that we've sat at the top of a league table for open data achievements. But it's interesting to see who's chasing at our heels. The French are number 2, and I'm sure they aspire to be number 1. A race to the top is a great way to promote best practice amongst our nations, but also it's a really valuable way.
You made the rules of the classroom, so it will be very difficult. So if I can share something, I feel deep in both of our countries work a lot with a lot of countries, and for example within the Open Government Partnership, and we know our partners very well, and we have something very singular to share. We are very close in this field of data. We are pretty good, both countries. And the axis, Paris, London, France, UK, about this field can be one of the main hotspots in the world, and I'm convinced by this, and I think you will say. And you like this picture? Yeah, well, we thought just come from internet. Huh?
So just to say at this stage,
are you sure we're allowed to use this?
I didn't pay any rights. So
just to say in summary, we really do appreciate the support of both our officials, of our ministers, the opportunity to do this, the support of the tech community, businesses and individuals who have talked to us. There is more to go at here. There are recommendations to make real. These are fine words, but they do need to be made real. We think these recommendations are at the right size of ambition, and with that we'd like to kind of get into hear what ministers think, and also perhaps have a discussion about the ideas contained there. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you both. That's really fascinating and really encouraged to hear that, particularly around the data skills, and to highlight some of the other European work that we've been involved with. There's a European Data Science Academy, which we've collaborated on with European funding. I'd now like to invite the Minister of State for the Digital Sector, Axel Lamia, to give us some remarks. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone, dear Ed, dear Henri. Thank you for welcoming us at the Open Data Institute. It is both a pleasure to be here, and I come with mixed feelings because, of course, with some sadness as well, because we're entering a period of uncertainties, and we do not know what is going to happen next meaning within the next 15 minutes or so. And I don't know if I should be talking about the past or the present or the future whenever I'm sitting next to Ed, but what I wanted to say is that it's been a great pleasure so far to work with you, and it's a with. And in the digital sector, it was, I think, a very interesting cooperation that we're having in the European Council, because we were probably leading the two groups of countries that were opposed on everything. So you wrote a letter to Commissioner Oettinger to say no regulation, and we're pro-innovation, and I wrote a letter to say we're also pro-innovation, but not in the same way. We want a level playing field, etc., etc. And in the end, I think we probably ended up being the two ministers who worked the best and in the closest way, which is an illustration of what Europe can bring when we make the efforts of working together. So it was both serious and fruitful, I think, but also a pleasure. And I'm sure we'll keep working together in the future. Thank you for your, Henri and Nigel, involvement in drafting that report. I think it really does set a stone. It is a starting point for subject that is really going to get bigger, going to grow in its importance, both intellectual, economic, social, and societal. And it was very important to set out a strategic vision at the start. And I do really share the spirit of the report, and I find it very interesting to see how it finds some very concrete echoes in the Digital Republic bill, and I am convinced that we are at the start of something that needs to grow in importance, and that my role and responsibility is to protect it, to nurture it, and to ensure that it extends. So the two basic principles and recommendations at the heart of the report, mainly that we need an infrastructure of data, including a kind of new mission in the quality of the data that are being published by the administration and used and reused by public and private entities. That idea is the way forward to build the future economy that will create value, economic value and jobs, I'm convinced as well. So this is really one important part. The other one being that this economy and society of data cannot emerge without a strong trust and confidence on the part of the users, and the users must be in the position of getting back as what we call in French libre disposition de ces données personnelles. I'm not sure how to translate that into English. I like that principle.
Personal data liberation.
Yeah, and it is a form of empowerment, but a digital technical one, and a legal one as well. And this has been translated into the national legislation in France, and it has very concrete applications, such as the principle of portability of data. And actually, that principle that we introduced in French law, that the European Commission is now very interested in and included in its official communication. Actually, the first time I've ever heard of it was here in the UK, when I found out that there was a specific piece of regulation regarding the banking sector in particular that was encouraging private banking actors to implement data portability. And I think with that, we both guarantee the free market, freedom of movement of data, and also the fact that the end users are in control of the data, usage data that they create. So it's really, this report is a step into what is going to happen tomorrow with the economy of data, but as we want together to see it happen. So it's a fantastic work that you've done. I will make everything possible to ensure that it translates into concrete measures. So I would like to invite you all in Paris soon, so that we can go further with announcing some of the precise measures that could see some cooperation. I like the idea of merging some ecosystems, and I know that the Catapult Center is already working well with Cap Digital, which is fantastic, and we need to do that more, and we need to do that more not only between Paris and London, but that's one of the lessons of the Brexit that we must learn, I think, is that innovation can be found everywhere, and it needs to be everywhere, and it's not only reserved to a certain technocratic elite that is to be found in well-connected and very cosmopolitan cities. So it's also that new emerging data economy can create value everywhere, and that makes the difference with the sort of traditional industry that creates jobs in one place in particular, and in that one place only. So we have to grasp all the opportunities of that coming economy with the vision, and the vision is in that report. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And to now invite our Minister for State for Culture and the Digital Economy, Ed Vaizey, please.
Thanks very much. It's wonderful to be here, and thank you, Axel, for mentioning the elephant in the room, which Nigel and Henri very carefully skirted around. But Nigel and Henri, thank you for this wonderful and important report, which has emerged from the agreement between Emmanuel Macron and George Osborne to set up the French-UK Data Task Force to come up with some concrete recommendations. But I think it's right that I echo Axel in terms of talking about Brexit, the referendum result. I was somebody who was very keen for us to remain as members of the European Union, and one of the reasons was Axel. Because as a minister working across this whole tech arena, if you like, and the digital single market, I found it very productive to work with my fellow ministers across Europe. And I think Axel put it very well, that although occasionally we find ourselves on the opposite sides of an argument, the very fact that we can meet in forums and discuss and debate future policies that could potentially have an impact on 500 million citizens and affect the climate in which tech companies operate is very stimulating and very important, because I think fundamentally, you know, Axel is French-Canadian, I'm British. We bat for our nation, but we also see the huge opportunities that exist for each of our countries in terms of the digital single market, and so we have a passion to get that right. I don't know what is going to happen in the future in terms of how the UK goes about leaving the European Union, but obviously I want to maintain as close a relationship as possible with our European partners, and I want to disrupt as little as possible both the European economies and the British economy as well. And I think the French, UK-French Data Task Force is a good example of how we cooperate. The French and the British cooperate on defence already. We cooperate across technology. I was privileged to be with Axel and Emmanuel Macron at the launch of the French Tech Hub in London, and I know that Axel will be speaking to quite a lot of those businesses this evening to talk about the implications of the referendum result. I went to a very fine event in Paris a couple of months ago, the Founders Forum, bringing together French tech entrepreneurs and UK tech entrepreneurs. And I think across the piece, in France and the UK, there is actually an enormous amount that brings us together. Across the whole policy area that I represent, I know I'm going very off-piste here, fashion, film, video games, television, and tech. There's a huge amount of cooperation and commonality. But back to the subject in hand, I think I will again echo what Axel said, which is she said that she wants to see, and she will do her bit to ensure concrete actions from this task force, and I utterly support her in that. And I think one of the concrete actions is to make sure that this report doesn't simply get left on a shelf and gather dust. And I think it's important that one of its recommendations, a procedural recommendation, if you like, is that we meet regularly and annually to catch up on the work of the UK French Data Task Force is really important, because if we don't maintain this, as it were, as effectively a kind of virtual institution, we may lose sight of some of the recommendations. So we need to maintain this collaboration. And I think as well, what is so good about this report is it has concrete and practical recommendations in terms of working together to look at key challenges in the data arena, to build the data infrastructure, to secure the skills, and I've been talking a lot in the last few days actually about the kind of skills we need in schools and beyond. And of course this issue of trust. And in our digital economy bill, which we're bringing forward, there will be important legislation changes to allow the government to share data across the silos to produce much, much better outcomes for people living in the UK. And it's imperative that we work together to overcome the suspicion about how data is used and to, as Nigel and Henri said, really explain to as many people as possible the huge advantages of using data in the way we're now able to use that data can bring. And I think it's also important as well that we see beyond our own silo of the UK and understand that actually sharing data with French companies and the French government can also lead to much greater outcomes, be it in health or education or crime or whatever. So this is a really important report, and I hope we will continue to make progress. And as somebody who benefits from open data, I mean, this will, Axel won't even be able to comprehend what I'm about to say, but as a minister waiting for my bus in the morning to get to work, not quite the same for French ministers, I know that. I'm able to take advantage of the open data in transport to know
the bus every morning. I to school.
When the 266 is going to arrive to work. But this is a small example of getting a minister to work, and the big example, of course, will be to cure all diseases. But I think Nigel said to me earlier, we feel like we're in the mid-1990s in terms of where the web was and where it is today in terms of data, and I think that's a very good way of putting it, and this is a great next step in really taking us forward. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'm delighted to say as well that the reason that some of that data is helping you get to work in the morning is thanks to an ODI startup called Transport API, which has now opened up 70% of the country's transport data. I think just a couple of reflections. The nature here of the work that we're doing around data infrastructure, the web knows no boundaries really, and we need to really think about this as part of a global data infrastructure. So this kind of collaboration, working out the mechanics of this between our countries, means that we're ready for a global economy. I think it's a really important point. We're going to open up the floor now to some questions. So if I could have Paula and Michelle, who are facilitating.
Yeah, NXL.
Yeah. Change.
Are there any other task force members as well? Do you want to ask?
Well, this is the stage where we actually open up for questions now. We've actually got a live link to France as well. A few people couldn't join us, so Ashil's going to let us know to get from France as well. So we've got 10 minutes now for, you've heard co-chairs, you've heard both ministers, you've seen the report now. It's time to open up really, if anyone's got any questions. So we'll go from, if you say your name and organisation as well.
Yeah, so Paul Maltby, I look after data here, from government in the UK government, sitting in the government digital service. So I wanted to add my congratulations to, I think, his ambitious and very practical report as well. With Henri and team and Paula and Etalab, we're all friends in many ways. We work very closely together on open data, on open government partnership, and indeed as we try to introduce data science within the analytical work of government too. So I just want to, rather than questions, really say that I'm really looking forward to continue to work together. Things in this report around data as infrastructure, our work on registers in GDS and across government is going to be really important. And I think working together on things like an address register would be a great place to start, as well as those many points about data capability and data literacy inside government. And I know this report is much broader than that, but I think there's a huge way for us to go and lots to work on. So I just want to provide my appreciation to the report too.
Yeah, thanks. Questions about that?
I'll speak really loudly. I'm Ellen, I'm the head of policy here at the Open Data Institute. My question, I think, is for both ministers, but also for Henri and Nigel, which is, we have some fantastic recommendations. They reaffirm great work that's already taking place in the UK and France, as Paul mentioned, and also kind of set forward a roadmap for what we need to do next. How can the tech community get involved to help shape how things progress from here?
Well, I mean, I think the tech community is very important, and we have a number of kind of institutions that provide a voice for the tech community, Tech City and Tech UK, the trade body. So Tech City is the kind of government body that supports tech businesses, and Tech UK is the trade body. One thing I found post-Brexit, funny enough, is how important the tech community has been in helping shape the debate in a more optimistic way, and also in terms of their energy, if you like, how quickly they have identified the key issues post-Brexit. And similarly, they can do that with this data task force. I think they can be partners in communicating the key challenges and opportunities that data provides. So I intend to work with them as a strong voice on this whole debate, in personalising the debate, if you like, making it real to people, and understanding why it's such a mainstream debate for people to be involved in, as opposed to a slightly esoteric debate that people feel may be removed from their day-to-day experience.
I think startups and the tech communities understand the need to access the markets of users at a larger scale, so beyond one domestic sphere. So there's a commercial interest and an experimental and research interest at stake to be able to address a larger market than only the British or the French one. That's the first, I think, advantage of a strong cooperation between the two tech communities. The other one would be that the startups specialized in the use of data probably face the same obstacles and challenges in accessing some types of data and accessing them at a certain level of quality, ensuring that they can actually make use of these data to create new innovative products and services. And so by fostering a stronger cooperation between the two tech, French and British tech communities, while they speak with a louder voice in addressing their administrations, in saying, well, something I could do in Britain, why is it not possible in France? And the other way around is true as well. So I think we need at that scale as a minimum to face the challenges of designing data-driven public policies by using open public data, but also the services produced by startups. So, and I think one of the very concrete recommendations of the report suggests to create a sort of common data passport, and I see an increasing number of startups in France specialized in data analysis, and I'm sure it's the same in the UK, and I can really see the advantages that would occur from having such a passport. So that's something I'd really like to work on.
Normally we don't speak after a minister. If I may add something, you know that I come from the tech community. I started some companies, and now I have the privilege to work within the government. And if I can share with my friends, is that we have to, okay, those technologies, those communities, those people will change the world. But they have to take seriously the other part of the world, to take seriously governmental issues, security issues, privacy issues, to speak with the other community. And we cannot just innovate as crazy. We have to think politically, we have to share ideas, to debate, and that's very, very important.
Just a final point on that as well. I think we absolutely must engage with the broadest tech community. But the other challenge is that these opportunities, we were commissioned by our Ministers of Finance and Chancellor from an economic viewpoint, but many of the examples that will really change and disrupt will be within health, they'll be within education, how we change our curricula to give them the skills they need. We really do need to get into the departments of state that are sometimes, doing their own thing, to have an integrated conversation about how standards might work, what openness means, what literacy means in these different contexts. Because we hear endlessly of the opportunities for open data in health, but delivering it endlessly about the opportunities for personal control of well-being and medical information. The opportunity to deliver it in a way that allows the technology to flourish and not just kill itself on policy obstacles is really important.
So my name is Martin Tisney. I'm from the Media Network. I'm a board member of Open Government Partnership and Open Data Institute. So France is chairing from October the Open Government Partnership, Partenariat pour un gouvernement ouvert. So my question is, how many of the recommendations in the reports pertain specifically to the UK and France, and obviously the UK founded Open Government Partnership, and how many could be extended to other countries? So in December at the Global Summit in France, in Paris, we'll have 70 countries, including the United Kingdom, one of the steering committee members, and France as chair. What can we do now with other countries, and what are those countries? my experience in working the G20 and other fora is that we have them really exciting, very unlikely alliances. So I've worked with the UK, France, Brazil, Italy, Indonesia, and Canada together around open data internationally. So how do we think from there around other alliances, and what's the role of OGP within that?
If I may, then first, everyone in this room and on internet has 6 days more to propose new ideas for the summit. So it's ogpsummit.org. So, and we discussed today, and the commission, the task force, will propose a workshop about the ideas of the task force during this summit. And so after this, everyone has to appreciate. I think that a lot of those ideas can be shared on these ideas that the most intelligence is within ecosystem, dynamic ecosystem, can be extended to other partners.
No, just to say, I mean, look, I mean, you could substitute fairly straightforwardly lots and lots of country terms or configuration terms into our report. The reason we began our work was this particular alliance of interests, particular strengths, and we did have a very clear mandate and notion that we would want to try and share this very broadly to influence not just European countries but G20 and wider into the Asia Pac, and there is huge interest around these topics.
I'll leave it to the experts.
Yeah, well, again, the OGP, that's just another perfect example of how we can build cooperation around informal agendas. And I remember 3 years ago, France was not even an official member of the organization. And then we thought, oh, the UK is leading. They are number one in the race. And that was very challenging. And we thought we also want to share our own vision and also enhance our own commitment in the open data agenda in particular. So and that's how I see the OGP summit taking place in Paris in December, as an opportunity to show the best practices coming from different nations, organizations, NGOs, any kind of entities, and then share them and create new opportunities for cooperation. And I think it's just an occasion to raise the bar and to put the ambition even higher. And I know that as far as France is concerned, we now have a deadline, we have that challenge, and to implement very concretely the bill I defended in Parliament, we want to be able to show what was done in France during that summit. So I think it's a perfect occasion to raise the level of ambition.
I'm going to just say, additionally to that, the ODI has found in doing its work, the appetite internationally for the work we do is huge. And the other surprising thing is not surprising, when you work with these other countries all around the globe, they sometimes find themselves in positions where they can be more innovative than you can back here. So you actually learn in the same way that many countries haven't been hobbled by the infrastructure of copper wire telecommunications. They can do things differently, and I think it's very much a two-way street.
And maybe that comes in the context of the Brexit as a new democratic need, but one new part of the OGP agenda, as chaired by France, will be around the civic tech and the potential of the tech community to reinvent the expression of democracy. And, well, one might think that one question asked asking for an answer by yes or no on an extremely complex question where there is no culture of referendum uses within the population might lead to some consequences that were not necessarily fully appreciated by the entire population. And so again, we see that there's a lot of potential in using some data and using the energy and drive around the tech community to create new tools to enhance the quality of the public policy debates.
Is there further questions about that?
Tom Rosenthal from Tech UK. I think what this has shown is how collaboration can help data innovation flourish. And one thing that's going to be important, I think, as we go forward, and the UK looks at its new relationship with Europe, will be those agreements which underpin the free flow of data and the transfer of data so that it doesn't become siloed in the UK. And I think that's both in research and partnership at these levels, but also that does underpin a lot of the tech community and the UK services sector more broadly. I was just wondering if there are any insights on, I should imagine right now that probably falls quite low down people's lists of priorities as they try and sort out what happens next. But to also get reassurance that whilst that might seem a bit dry and technical to some, that it's going to be absolutely key to how we go forward in the future.
No, I mean, I would say it's very high on our agenda. It's absolutely probably one of the top 3 issues that we're thinking about in terms of the tech community, and we want, in principle, the UK to be part of the European data protection regulations, and obviously that's where we'll start from. But there is also, to a certain extent, an opportunity both for the European Union and the UK, in the sense that there may be in the future an element of competition in how we put together our data regulations. It's no secret the UK government was concerned about how bureaucratic the GDPR might become. But clearly, we want a bridge between the European Union, the UK, and the US. The Privacy Shield's just been negotiated. A huge amount of effort has gone into that. So in principle, we very much want to be part of that US-European Union partnership on data. It's absolutely, you can rest assured that there's no doubt in the UK government about how important getting this right will be in the next couple of years.
That's good to hear, because we actually didn't have that discussion since the Brexit referendum happened. The question is also a priority for the French government, although it's important to mention that there is no free flow of data within the European Union yet, and that's part of the agenda of the digital single market to address the question. So it will be important before we start negotiating any agreement with third parties. And a month ago, third parties would have meant the United States. The question now is, what about the UK? That we find a common understanding on these questions between the 27 member states. But I'm sure that the UK will be very actively involved in the discussions, and the regulation on data protection was adopted before the Brexit. So that will be a key strategic priority, not only in the context of a Brexit, but in the multilateral and bilateral discussions to happen between states in the years to come.
Are we in Nigel? Any thoughts on free flow of data?
It's important, and it needs to happen as efficiently and frictionlessly as possible.
But I think we've got time for one more question. I think I saw the hand raised in the back.
Actually, we have a question online for, I think, Mr. Lemaire. Is France going to support those recommendations at the European level? Is the French government going to back those ideas in Brussels and with its partners? Not today, of course.
Is that part of the official recommendations? That would be
no,
interesting.
No,
I'm just. I'm very pragmatic in the sense that I think that to see a political ambition translated into concrete actions, it's very important to start at a modest level. I don't know if Franco-British cooperation is a modest level, but maybe one of the mistakes that we've done in the past was to immediately think at the European level and think Brussels and think EU regulation, and that sort of top-down approach doesn't work very well in the digital age. So I'd rather, my approach would be to, I would say, push the two agendas at the same time, but with the view of implementing with concrete results that these recommendations between France and the United Kingdom, and pushing it as a more global agenda and as France does it on other questions in Brussels, but knowing that this is a more long-term commitment. And but yes, if it's, I mean, this kind of report does give us ideas of what to promote at the European level, of course, but I'm not sure we would see a European report of that such in the months to come.
We're interested in time. We'll have back again, but thank you very much to the panel.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I mention one more thing to add? I actually take the bus to take my daughter to school every morning, but the reason I started doing that in Paris, and I wasn't doing it when I was in London, because I find it cheaper and more reliable in Paris.
Race to the top.
Thank you, everyone.
Put in more plus.
So just in closing, before we break for drinks, I think that the one feature here is we have far more in common than that which divides us. And when I think about the work that we've seen in collaboration, we have the ODI's franchises now in 28 franchises in 20 countries around the world. And our collaboration with our French franchise saw us help Burkina Faso have its first democratic election. So the power of this, as you say, as Nigel was mentioning, the power of this innovation is going to come from unexpected collaborations. So we're very keen to see these links being made and the power of network thinking ultimately bringing people together. So I'd like to thank everyone for coming and encourage you also, as you're having some drinks, not only to talk to each other, but also to have a look around our offices. We are launching our 5th Data as Culture art exhibition tomorrow night, and also you're most welcome to come back to that launch at about 7 o'clock tomorrow evening if you happen to be around. But you can have a little preview, and if you have any questions, please do ask me. We've run this commission now since we started. So thanks again for coming, and enjoy the refreshments.
To be continued.